The Superstition Wilderness covers 160,000 acres east of Phoenix, and almost nobody lives inside it. Most people see a wall of volcanic rock. What they are actually looking at is the leftovers of collapsed supervolcanoes. At least 3 calderas, each roughly 10 to 12 miles wide, formed somewhere between 15 and 30 million years ago. Hikers up there sometimes report hearing rumbling like rolling thunder. Arizona State Park says that is seismic activity resonating off the canyon walls. Everything in this region is a story about what is underneath it. A town of 6 people that still gets its own voting precinct. 5 stone beehives, 30 feet tall, that nobody can prove who built. 3 entire towns that a copper company evicted and then dug into an open pit. And at number 1, a place still standing today that is scheduled to collapse into a crater nearly 2 miles across. Make sure you stick with us to the end, because that story is number 1 on this list. Welcome to the channel, where we dig up the places the map forgot. If you have not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because we post deep dives like this every single week. Today we are counting down 10 places beneath America's Superstition Mountains. Number 10, Tortilla Flat. Population 6. 6 people live there. The town has a United States Post Office and its own voting precinct, and according to the Gross Management Department of Arizona's main Phoenix Post Office, that makes it the smallest official community in the state to have both. It exists because of a dam. In 1903, the Reclamation Service began building Theodore Roosevelt Dam, and it needed a wagon road through some of the most hostile terrain in Arizona, plus stopping points along that road for freight teams. Tortilla Flat became one of them in 1904. Before that, it was a camping ground for prospectors hunting gold in the Superstitions. Long before that, the Yavapai used the valley to cross the range. The dam was finished in 1911. The freight traffic stopped. Every other camp on that route died. Tortilla Flat shrank, kept its post office, and quietly became the thing you stop at on the way to somewhere else. It has nearly gone twice since. A flood in 1942 wrecked it and drove most of the residents out. A fire later took the store, the restaurant, and the motel. Almost every building standing today dates to the late 1980s. The Mercantile went up in 2009. Inside the saloon, the walls and the ceiling are papered in signed dollar bills left by visitors. Estimates run to tens of thousands of dollars hanging there. It is all still open: country store, saloon, gift shop, museum, post office, and a live band on the BBQ patio from mid-November until it gets too hot to play. 6 residents and a voting precinct of their own. An election in Tortilla Flat could theoretically be decided by a handful of people who all work the same bar. Number 9, Christmas, Arizona. The claim jumped on Christmas morning: there is no snow. There are no pines. Christmas sits at the southern tip of the Dripping Spring Mountains in Gila County, about 10 miles north of Winkleman, and it is mesquite, cactus, and dust. One former resident remembered that everything was permanently dirty and there was no keeping up with it. The name has nothing to do with the season. It has to do with a land grab. 2 mining claims were filed on this ore. One in 1878 by Bill Tweed and Dennis O'Brien. Another in 1882 by Dr. James Douglas. Both were invalidated because the ground turned out to sit inside the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation. For 18 years, the deposit was known, mapped, and legally untouchable. Then in December 1902, a group incorporated the Saddle Mountain Mining Company, betting the boundary was about to move. On December 22nd, President Theodore Roosevelt signed an executive order shrinking the reservation and returning the property to the public domain. George Chittenden had already set up a chain of relay riders between the telegraph office at Casa Grande and his camp. Word reached him late on Christmas Eve. He and his partner N.H. Meller rode out and staked the ground at first light. Meller's own account was that they had jumped the earlier claims, but it was Christmas Day in the morning, so they filled their stockings and named the place in honor of the day. It paid. Between 1905 and 1943, the mine produced roughly 55 million pounds of copper, worth over $10 million. The town peaked around 1,000 people in 1930, with a dairy, a grocery, a school, a church, a cemetery, a hat shop, and a barber shop. 3 minerals were first described to science here: apatite, junitwite, and ruizite. And every December, America mailed its Christmas cards to Gila County just to get the postmark. The post office shut for good on March 30th, 1935. Nobody told the country. Holiday mail kept arriving for roughly 20 more years, and Winkleman quietly forwarded it on. The population today is 0. The mine went open pit and swallowed several of the town's buildings. It is closed to the public. For 2 decades, people kept mailing their Christmas wishes to a town that no longer had a postmark to give them. Number 8. Cochran and the Butte Coke Ovens. The beehives nobody can explain. 5 stone beehives stand in a row on the bank of the Gila River, about 15 miles east of Florence. Each is roughly 25 feet across on the inside and 30 to 32 feet tall, built from cut native stone stacked without mortar. They are listed on the National Register as the Butte Cochran Charcoal Ovens. Nobody can agree who built them. One account credits the Pinal Consolidated Copper Company in 1882. Another puts them in the 1870s. A homesteader named William Fred Jenkins said Scottish miners built them, and Jenkins had a better vantage point than most because he lived inside one of them. There are fringe claims involving ancient Central American peoples and early Spaniards. Some research holds the ovens were never actually fired at all, though there is a slag dump sitting right beside them. What is not disputed is the purpose. Mesquite wood was burned slowly inside them for days to make fuel, and the fuel was carried across the Gila to the smelters. Here's the thing. The town of Cochran did not exist yet. The ovens predate it. When John S. Cochran was appointed postmaster on January 3, 1905, and a mining camp took shape across the river, the ovens were already standing, already old, already unexplained. The camp got a name, and the ovens ended up carrying it, despite having nothing to do with one another. Cochran lasted 10 years. The post office was discontinued on January 15, 1915. Peak population was about 100 people, a general store, and a boarding house. The ovens have now outlived the town by more than a century. They sit on 189 acres of private ranch land, fenced, closed to visitors, with the Pinal County Sheriff's Office issuing criminal trespass citations. One of them has lost its top, carried off in pieces by people who wanted a souvenir. The town has been gone since 1915, and the mystery it is named after is being dismantled by hand, one stone at a time, by tourists. Number 7. Goldfield, the town that died 3 times. It died in 1897. It came back and died again in 1926. Fire took what was left in 1943. Then in 1984, a man with no interest in mining bought the ruins and built the whole thing again. Goldfield sits on a small hill between the Superstition and Goldfield Mountains, about 5 miles northeast of Apache Junction, with the sheer west wall of Superstition Mountain directly behind it. The Apache reportedly called this area the Devil's Playground. Gold was found in 1892 by Colin Hakes, Riley Morse, and the Merrill brothers. On March 8, 1893, the Arizona Republican reported the strike, with ore valued at a reported $1,000 a ton. The post office opened on October 7th that year under Postmaster James L. Patterson. By some accounts, the town grew larger than Phoenix, though the peak figures range wildly across sources, from 1,500 residents up to 5,000. The problem was geology. The vein was rich, but it was faulted, displaced by the same tectonic movement that built the entire range. In 1897, the miners followed it straight into worthless rock. The post office was discontinued on November 2, 1898. What happened next is the strange part. Goldfield did not get revived by economics. It got revived by individuals. George U. Young, Secretary of Arizona Territory and Mayor of Phoenix, brought in modern equipment and put his own name on the place. Youngberg had a post office from 1920 to 1926. Young died in 1926 and took the town with him. Fire finished the rest in 1943. Then Bob and Lou Ann Scoos bought the property in 1984 and rebuilt it. Today it is fully operational. Underground mine tour, narrow gauge railroad, zip line, gold panning, staged gunfights, shops, and a saloon. It is loud, it is busy, and it is the opposite of a silent ruin. A town that failed 3 separate times is now the only place on this list making money. Number 6. Apache Land Movie Ranch. the church that wouldn't burn. On May 29, 1969, fire went through Apache Land Movie Ranch and destroyed most of it. 7 buildings walked out. On 14th February 2004, at 7 in the evening, it happened again. Probably an electrical fault in the second story of the saloon. 14 of the 21 buildings were lost. The same 7 survived. Apache Land opened in 1960 on 1,800 acres of open desert directly beneath the west face of Superstition Mountain, built to be the western town Hollywood could not afford to build in California. It worked. Dozens of films, more than a dozen television series, decades of commercials. In 1969, it hosted an Elvis Presley picture called Charo. It is the only one of his films where he does not sing on screen. He grew a beard for it. For one sequence, the production needed a church, so they put up a facade with a steeple designed specifically to be blown off on camera. That facade is one of the 7. After the second fire, there was no money to rebuild a third time. The land was sold to a developer and bulldozed. Sue and Ed Birmingham donated the chapel and the barn to the Superstition Mountain Museum, and volunteers took the chapel apart plank by plank, nail by nail, carried it about 4 miles up the road, and put it back together on the museum's 15-acre grounds. It is there now. White against the purple mountain, the first thing you see driving in. It operates as a wedding venue. There is a statue of Elvis on the altar, and couples can ask to have him removed. The barn is there too, and the gallows with the charred post still on it, and a 20-stamp ore mill that a museum volunteer described as possibly the best preserved, fully original stamp mill in North America. A concrete slab bearing the handprints and signature of Patsy Montana, the first female country singer with a #1 hit, was found on a back trail in 2015 and donated. The museum once displayed a vial of dirt scooped from the exact patch of ground beside the chapel where Elvis lay bleeding in that film. Current staff cannot find it and do not remember it ever being there. A building that outlived 2 fires, and the only thing nobody can account for is a jar of dirt. If you are finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments which of these you would actually drive out to see, because we read every single one. We have covered some strange places so far, but we are only halfway down the list, and from here, the stories stop being funny. Number 5, Pinal City, 2,000 people and a set of wagon ruts. Walk the lost trail out of Superior, and at some point you cross a set of wagon wheel ruts cut into the desert floor. They are the clearest surviving thing from a town of 2,000 people. Pinal City sat along Queen Creek at the foot of Picket Post Mountain, with the cliff wall of Apache Leap to the east. Soldiers under General George Stoneman tried to settle the area from November 1870 to August 1871 and gave up. Prospectors and ranchers came after them, silver was found, and the Silver King mine discovery in 1875 set the whole thing in motion. But Pinal was never really its own town. It was the Silver King's stomach. The king sat up in the hills where there was no water and no room to build a mill, so the ore came down by wagon to Pinal to be crushed and processed. That arrangement made 2,000 people rich enough to build a main street by 1878. The post office opened on April 10, 1878 as Picket Post and was renamed Pinal on June 27, 1879. It also made the town completely dependent on one mine and one road. Rivals like Globe got rail connections. Pinal got wagons. When the King's silver played out, there was no second industry and no second reason to stay. The post office closed on November 28, 1891. The repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act in 1893 finished off silver-dependent settlements across the region, though Pinal was already going. 13 years, start to finish. What is there now is scattered ruins, indistinct foundations, partial walls of the ore mill, a pioneer cemetery, and mining equipment too heavy to have been worth hauling away. Birds mostly, wrens, quail, hawks, no machinery, no visitors. A mile or two away, the Silver Queen mine kept digging, hit copper instead of silver, and became the town of Superior by 1900. Superior is still there. Pinal is gone. The road it died for is still cut into the ground. Number 4, the Apache Trail at Fish Creek Hill. The road the mountain keeps taking back. State Route 88 is a numbered state highway. Part of it carries signs that read, "Caution, primitive road, no trailers, four-wheel drive, and UTVs only." A DOT itself has pointed out that this is not signage you normally find on a state highway. It was never designed to be one. It was cut between 1903 and 1911 as a construction road so mule teams could haul cement and machinery to a dam site in a canyon nobody could otherwise reach. When Theodore Roosevelt Dam was finished in 1911, the Southern Pacific Railroad worked out that the road was more spectacular than the destination and started busing tourists across it. Arizona eventually paved the western half. The eastern half stayed what it had always been. A shelf cut into a cliff face, hairpin turns, unguarded drops, Apache Lake somewhere below. In June 2019, the Woodbury Fire burned almost 124,000 acres of Tonto National Forest above it. When the monsoon came, there was nothing left upslope to hold the water back. The mountain took the road. 5 miles of SR 88 between Fish Creek Hill Overlook at milepost 222 and the Revis Trailhead at 227 closed. It stayed closed for roughly 5 years. A DOT got 1.7 miles of it back in 2022. A $4 million interim project began on July 22, 2024, and reopened the stretch that September to high-clearance four-wheel drives and UTVs only. The permanent fix is estimated at $33.7 million, and ADOT is still looking for the money. Then in July 2026, the monsoon came back. A gauge near the Revis Trailhead recorded over 8 inches of rain. One near Fish Creek Hill recorded over 5. The road closed again. Tortilla Flat's general manager called it deja vu. It was restored and reopened later that month. A DOT's own warning is the part worth keeping. Conditions here change after every rainfall, meaning the road you drove yesterday may not be the road that is there today. Arizona keeps rebuilding it, and the mountain keeps filing an objection. Number 3. Old Roosevelt and the villages under the lake. What the drought brings back. Theodore Roosevelt Lake is 22.4 miles long, 349 feet deep at its maximum, with 128 miles of shoreline. In a normal year, it looks like flat water ringed by desert mountains. In a dry year, it starts handing things back. The Reclamation Service picked a canyon where the Salt River squeezed down to about 200 feet across and built the first major dam of the new federal reclamation program there. It was originally called Tonto Dam. A town grew up below the site around 1903 to feed and house the workers. Stores, a boarding house, the whole apparatus of a construction camp. Everyone knew the town would end up underwater. The plan was to move it uphill in time. In the spring of 1908, the river ran high and the reservoir filled faster than anyone had modeled. Buildings that had not been moved yet simply went under. They came back up in the 1930s when the water dropped. But the town is not the older layer. Salado communities lived along the Salt River for centuries before any of this, and when the reservoir filled, their villages went under too. During the drought of the early 2000s, levels fell far enough to re-expose archaeological sites, and Tonto National Forest archaeologists got out there to study them. Forest archaeologist Scott Wood said that some of those villages had been seen only once since the lake was filled. Once. In more than a century. The modern community of Roosevelt sits on higher ground now. Tonto National Monument protects the cliff dwellings that were high enough to escape the water, with a visitor center, guided tours, and longer upper dwelling hikes from November to April by reservation. Everything else is down there in the dark, waiting on a bad enough drought to be looked at again. Number 2. Ray, Sonora, and Barcelona. 3 towns, 1 hole. There is a public viewpoint on the road to Kearney where you can stand and look straight down into an open pit. Terraced walls, haul trucks, crushers running, tailings piles the color of bleached bone against red rock. Teapot Mountain on the skyline. 3 towns used to be down there, roughly 3,000 people. The Ray Mining District was organized in 1873. In 1909, the Arizona Hercules Copper Company built Ray as a company town, and it became a serious underground operation with a worldwide reputation for innovative practice. Census records from 1909 show a hospital with a doctor, 3 nurses, and a cook. A newspaper, the Arizona Copper Camp, was published there from 1910 to 1920. 2 more communities grew alongside it. Sonora was predominantly Mexican and Mexican-American. Barcelona housed workers from Spain. They were segregated communities, separated by the prejudices of the time. A Lebanese merchant community settled in as well. The Ghanem, Ferris, Haddad, and Basha families ran the stores. Kennecott Copper Corporation took control in 1933. Then the economics of copper changed. Low-grade disseminated ore that was not worth tunneling for became enormously worth digging for, provided you dug on a large enough scale. Kennecott began stripping the surface in 1948. Open pit digging started in 1952. The conversion was complete by 1955. Here's the detail that stops people cold. The ore body was directly underneath the towns, so the company hired a developer to build a replacement. Kearney went up 11 miles away, completed in 1958, and incorporated in 1959. Relocation began that year. In 1962, Kennecott sent eviction notices to the 2,700 people still living in Ray and Sonora, with a deadline of December 1965. Some families moved to Kearney, others scattered to Hayden and elsewhere. Then the company removed the ground they had lived on. 1 building survived. Father Elias Keller, the parish priest at Sonora, talked the company into sparing St. Helen's Catholic Church. It is believed to be the only structure still standing from any of the 3 towns. The town sites are no longer reachable by road. 4-wheeler or horseback only. The pit is still working. Kearney is a functioning municipality. It has a copper basin railway museum, and historic photographs of Old Ray hang in its municipal buildings. Every November, the town holds Founders Day, and one of the fixtures is a then and now photo display showing buildings where they originally stood and then where they ended up after the move. 60 years on, the town built to hold the survivors still throws an annual party where the main attraction is looking at pictures of the place that was taken from them. Number 1. Oak Flat, Chichil, Budagotil. The hole that hasn't been dug yet. You turn off US 60 east of Superior, up through the tunnel cut under the cliff wall of Apache Leap, and a few minutes later the desert stops looking like desert. There are oak groves, real shade, boulder fields with chalk on them from climbers. It sits high enough to run cooler than the valley floor, and it is green in a way that nothing around it is green. Birds. Wind moving through the oaks. Somewhere out on the horizon, the low industrial hum of a plant. People are praying here. They have been for generations. Chichil Budagotil is sacred to Western Apache peoples and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as a traditional cultural property. It is a campground. It was a renowned rock climbing and birding area. Nothing about standing on it tells you what is underneath. 7,000 feet down is what Resolution Copper describes as the second largest known copper deposit in the world. An estimated 1.6 billion tons of ore. It is too deep for an open pit and too big for conventional tunneling. The only economic method is block caving. You undercut the ore body from below and let gravity bring it down to you, funneling through the rock like sand through an hourglass, leaving voids that cannot be backfilled. The plan is to pull 110,000 to 160,000 tons a day. The consequence is not disputed by anyone, including the company. As the voids grow, the ground above falls in. The 2021 Federal Environmental Impact Statement projects a subsidence crater between 800 and 1,115 feet deep and roughly 1.8 miles wide, forming after about 6 years of mining. Resolution's own studies put it at 700 to 1,000 feet deep after 40 years. Arizona's meteor crater is about half that width. The edge of it comes within roughly 1,500 feet of Apache Leap. Groundwater pumping is projected to draw water levels down 199 feet in places and destroy at least 18 groundwater-dependent ecosystems, a number of them sacred springs. The site had been protected from mining by executive order since the 1950s. In December 2014, a land transfer rider was inserted into the National Defense Authorization Act. a bill that had to pass. That undid the protection. What followed was a decade of litigation over whether destroying a place of worship counts as burdening the exercise of religion. The Advisory Council on Historic Preservation refused to sign the project's programmatic agreement. In May 2025, the Supreme Court declined to hear Apache Stronghold versus United States. Justice Gorsuch, joined by Justice Thomas, dissented, calling the refusal a grave mistake. On March 16, 2026, the U.S. Forest Service transferred ownership of Oak Flat to Resolution Copper. In April, Apache Stronghold filed an updated lawsuit seeking to reverse the transfer. And here is where it sits right now. At the bottom of Resolution's number 10 shaft, 6,943 feet down, the rock is roughly 175 degrees Fahrenheit. So is the water dripping off it. Nobody can work down there unless a refrigeration plant on the surface is pushing chilled air into the shaft continuously. And the plant large enough to run an actual production mine has not been built yet. Meanwhile, the campground is being maintained under contract by Four Winds Contracting, a globe-based business owned by San Carlos Apache member Michael Woodbury and staffed entirely by San Carlos employees. Nothing has collapsed. The oaks are still there. The climbers are still there. The ceremonies are still happening. Every other place on this list is something that already happened. This is the only one you can still walk out and stand on, and it is scheduled not to exist. 10 places, and every one of them turns out to be a story about what the ground was hiding or about what somebody wanted out of it. For me, it is Oak Flat, a green place with people praying in it and a date on it. That one stays with me. Which of these surprised you most, and which one did we miss? If this kind of forgotten American history is what you are here for, subscribe.